Okay, I'm Hannah. Welcome to the Lung Health Insights podcast. Today, me and my guest will be talking about the link between e-cigarettes and respiratory health issues, specifically cancer and e-cigarette addictions in adolescents. My guest is Dr. Mark Plumb, and would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm Mark Plumb. I'm a pulmonary critical care doctor here in Milwaukee. Been practicing in the community for 30 years. Uh, got a MD degree at Washington University in St. Louis. Here in the community, uh, time split between seeing people in clinic and seeing people in the hospital. Um, a lot of COPD, some lung cancer, asthma, sleep apnea is a lot of what I see in the office.
All right, thank you. So we're just gonna start by talking about just some things linking e-cigarettes to cancer and other health risks. So in my research, I found that people that use e-cigarettes are 4 times more likely to develop lung cancer than people who only smoke cigarettes. And I also found that e-cigarettes are the most commonly used tobacco product among youth in the US. So I was just wondering if you've seen like a lot of increase of children or younger people coming in with respiratory problems that could maybe be linked to e-cigarette usage or things like that.
Um, I have an adult practice, so mostly we see people 17 and above. So my experience with the younger end of the 17 to 90-year-old curve is somewhat low, but we certainly see a lot of people vaping, some sometimes primarily where that's the first thing they do. A lot of people who are trying to quit smoking and go to vaping as a tool to try and do that.
Yeah, I've also seen that. Have you seen like, hmm, um, have you seen it becoming more and more popular recently?
Yeah, I think it's a new thing over the last 10, 15 years, and we certainly see more of it, and not only in the office, but just going out in public and seeing, it seems like people are constantly have this thing in their hand and they
Yeah.
can't it's like some people with telephones, other people just have this vape thing in their hand, and it's
Yeah, I've seen
because
a lot of them.
you don't see a lot of people smoking cigarettes out in public anymore, when you go to restaurants and things like that, because you can't do it. But
Yeah.
it seems like you just see a lot of vaping. Yeah.
Yeah, and even like I've seen a lot of my friends and even kids younger than me, like younger than 18, 17, have like become addicted to it and like I've honestly seen like firsthand like their health declining too and everything. That's why I like became so passionate in this because it just like makes like I care about them and I care about people like and seeing them people become so like addicted to this new thing.
And in cigarettes, nicotine is really the addictive component. And that's when you see people trying to stop smoking by nicotine replacement therapies, things like, nicotine gum, um, other nicotine products, and vaping just sort of fell into that. And when you start having such a taboo about smoking cigarettes, it's easy to say, well, I'm not smoking cigarettes, I'm just vaping.
Right.
But if you're vaping nicotine containing products, you're becoming addicted. And at some point, are you going to say, well, maybe it's better maybe I'll just try getting my nicotine from a cigarette. And then all of a sudden you're going down that road.
Yeah, and I've also seen, I know like before we talked a little bit about, you mentioned like nicotine things versus non-nicotine vapes maybe. Like, and I did a little bit of research on that, but I found that mostly like even if you're inhaling things with no nicotine, it's still harmful for the body. But do you think that would be like a good alternative or no?
In my practice, I try and encourage that. And if people are using nicotine products, I try and have them go down gradually on the amount of nicotine content in the vape liquid that they're using,
Hmm.
because there is preliminary data looking at nicotine and emphysema, and it nicotine does seem in some of these studies to be promoting emphysema. So if you're yes, you may or may not get lung cancer if you continue to vape, but you're still damaging your lungs from a COPD emphysema risk.
Right. I did most of my research on out of like younger people, and I just found that nicotine is very harmful for the adolescent's brain and for the parts that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control and like development overall. So that's why my innovation, I aim to like mainly decrease that and hopefully stop the next generation from becoming addicted to nicotine. Now I'm gonna talk about my innovation that I had an idea of, where aims to decrease underage vaping and underage e-cigarette use. It's a device that would be implemented in all like smoke shops where people buy vapes, where you have to scan an ID with your purchase of a vape, and also you maybe another idea would be that you could only buy one to hopefully limit reselling to younger kids or like just limit your intake overall. I was wondering if you had any, like, if you thought this was a good idea or bad idea, don't be afraid to like shut it down or.
No, I think that would be a good idea. I mean, you there we do that already. You know, and if you want to get cigarettes, you get carded. If you want to buy alcohol, you get carded. Um, so we do that with other devices or other things that society has deemed dangerous.
Mhm.
Um, and I think vaping would fall into that category also. Uh,
Yeah.
and I like the idea of having to scan an ID that gets a record of it. It to some degree it would keep the storekeepers, they would have a record that they've done it so
Yeah.
that they don't get in trouble. Um, if you've got X number that you're selling and you've got X number that you've scanned, therefore you've checked everybody.
Yeah, because I know
Buys it.
that like the big problem is like you can just find places that don't ID, and then like that honestly leads, I feel like, to the main, that's how most people underage get vapes. So I feel like if you were like had to scan an ID to buy a vape, that would like get rid of that issue. You couldn't just go somewhere and be like, "Oh, they don't ID, so I can buy it." You actually have to scan it to get it as well.
Right. I mean that's a good idea. I think that's a harder lift legislatively because you get oh, you're invading personal freedom. It's the government. You're scanning your name. They're keeping track of you. You're
Right.
going to be on some register of people who have this. Now are they going to use that? Oh, you've vaped for so long, therefore you're responsible for this. You don't get health care because of that. Or,
Right.
there's a lot of arguments that could be drummed up, some of them virtuous and some of them not virtuous, to try and knock the idea down.
Yeah,
But
that is true. I didn't think about that.
I think in general it's a good idea.
Yeah.
And you know if you did that for vaping, then you could say, okay, are we going to do that for alcohol? Are we going to do that for tobacco?
Yeah, because that I was wondering too, like why that hasn't already been implemented. Because like you would think that would be like pretty standard.
I think it's probably a um, individualism, government invasion type of
I agree.
argument.
Yeah. Um, I think that this is like an important thing to be researching and like finding ways to get rid of it. Do you agree? Do you think this is a worth like while um problem for research and stuff?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot of ongoing research about vaping and smoking cessation and what works better. There's some data that if you already smoke and you use vaping as a way to quit, uh, you do have some success. Maybe up there the same as varenicline, which is the newer medication, Chantix that's used, maybe better than Zyban. Um, but a lot of times it's an individual preference, and what works for one person might not necessarily work for another. And we know that smoking cessation isn't easy, and it takes multiple tries, so you can't be disheartened that you're, 0 for 1 on Chantix and you're 0 for 2 on nicotine gum, and
Hmm.
people keep trying, and sometimes they will try one thing, and the next time they'll try something else, and the next time they'll try something else, and you know, sometimes it sticks, but still it's a low percentage each time, but you have to keep encouraging them to keep trying.
Right. And I also just wonder, like, why, if people know the risks, I wonder what causes them to continue, like, not continue, but even just start. Like, I wonder if there's not enough information for younger people to learn about what the risks are before they start doing it, just maybe because they think it's cool or fun. I wonder why people still choose to vape and do that kind of stuff, even when they know the risks. And obviously, I know the addiction part is like a big part of that.
Yeah. And I think probably because it's new, the risks aren't out there as much in public, so that people will say, "Oh, this it's safer than cigarettes. There's so many less chemicals in it. It's okay if I do this." You
Hmm.
know, so and it's probably easier access to vaping material than to cigarettes when you're young.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, I mean, and it is that starting age. If you can stop them from starting when kids are in their teens or in the younger 20s, then you're probably going to have success lifelong at keeping them away. It's
right.
very rare that I'll see someone in the office that's 45 years old and started smoking that year. You
Yeah,
know,
that's
and
kind of what my thought process was.
yeah, you see that about once or twice a year. That's it. You know,
Yeah, I
then you
see.
look at them and you go, why the hell?
Yeah. That's kind of
And
what I thought. I feel like targeting the younger generation would help so that it doesn't develop again, like prevent the next generations and maybe just kind of like almost breed it out, like of continuing generations in the future.
and I think that's probably a good portion of why the tobacco smoking rate is down in the country, is just because you have less people entering into the population that start out as smokers in their
Hmm.
teens. Certainly have people that quit, but I think a lot of the decrease is probably that people in their teens and 20s don't start. Uh, but now, unfortunately, they have this other product that they can sort of think to themselves is safer, yet they still get to be cool.
Yeah, I heard one of the big like problems is like popcorn lung. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, bronchiolitis obliterans.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and especially in young people when they start smoking, you'll see that. It's not very common, but it's very debilitating.
Yeah, and do you usually like when you see effects of people with smoking, does it last for a long, like I read that sometimes it can be lifelong or like it most of the time it is?
It depends on what side effect or what complication you're talking about.
Yeah.
The risk of lung cancer, we used to say, well, if you stop smoking for 7 years, then your risk is back to the normal population. Then it became, well, maybe if you stop smoking for 12 years and then 50, and pretty soon it never goes back to normal. It's sort of like the
Hmm.
asymptotic curve, the ski slope type thing, but you never really get back down to where the non-smokers were. For other things like people who are hypoxic, you stop smoking for a few days and you get the carbon monoxide out of your body, and your oxygenation improves.
Yeah.
Uh, COPD, the inflammation that's associated with it, sputum production in that can go down over time. The lung destruction that's really emphysema, that's there for life.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of different. You can't say that everything goes down or nothing goes down.
Yeah.
Overall, the benefit is certainly there of stopping
Yeah.
or never starting.
Right. All right. Well, thank you very much for having this talk with me and coming on the podcast.
Sure, and I think that's a great idea, and if you carry it forward, um, I'd love to see it in the news.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Bye, everyone.